Welcome one and all to the Seven Sugar Digital Health webinar series. This is the fourth webinar that we had in the past 4 months. This is Adi Kesarla, co-founder of Seven Sugar. We bring these webinars to help doctors manage challenges of going digital and at the same time showcase a new set of opportunities that doctors can tap by going digital. Needless to say, the pandemic is forcing healthcare providers to look at new and efficient ways of delivering healthcare to their patients. GDM diabetes management presents an interesting use case for delivering care digitally and hassle-free for both the patient and the doctor. This webinar will present some case studies of managing GDM using the digital health platform Seven Sugar, followed by a demo of the platform. Seven Sugar is a telehealth integrated digital health platform with AI, IoT, and blockchain implementation, providing truly scalable, secure, and personalized solutions to doctors and patients in the management of chronic diseases. To help us with the webinar, I have two endocrinologists here who have graciously agreed to join on a Saturday evening. First is Dr. Tejal Lathia. She is a gold medalist, specialist in endocrinology from TN Medical College and BYL Nair Charitable Hospital, Mumbai, under the able guidance of Dr. P.K. Vartakavi, Dr. Manoj Chedda, and Dr. Nikhil Bhagwat. She's been practicing since the last 18 years and treating patients in hospitals in Navi Mumbai, Fortis Hiranandani, Apollo Hospitals, MGM New Hospital, and Cloud9 Maternal and Child Healthcare. She is a recipient of several national and international awards and as well as international publications.
Awards are the publications.
Publications. All right.
I'm not a Padma Shri or anything.
All right. Okay.
So I will introduce myself, Adi. Sorry, I put my TV slide.
Well, we'll start off with Seven Sugar. I think we will.
Yes, we will introduce ourselves. Don't worry about it.
All right. Thank you for that small correction. I just jumped ahead, while I was reading the text. Dr. Abhijit Bograj is an endocrinologist at Columbia Hospital. He got his MD/DM from MS Rama Medical College, Bangalore. He is often seen conducting workshops on CGM and presenting case studies to doctors, and I hear that almost on a monthly basis. On weekends, he provides free healthcare clinic to underserved populations at the outskirts of Bangalore. Typically they see about 1,000 patients on a typical weekend. Of course, now because of COVID, this is closed, but it's an amazing experience to be there to see in the health clinic. He's also the co-founder of Seven Sugar. So me and Abhijit are partners in crime, for Sensei Healthcare. And it's a pleasure to welcome both of you. Dr. Tejal, it's yours now. I think you can share your slides and then you can get started.
Yes, I can. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I can see a lot of familiar faces. So it's so nice. It's like I'm among friends. And, we can have a chat. Just give me 1 sec. I'll put my slides. Yeah. Okay, so unfortunately, when Adi asked me what do you want to keep as the heading of the webinar, so I said, managing GDM made easy. But then I realized, because I was very busy at the time and I wanted to get him off my back by giving him an answer, so I said, just say managing GDM made easy. But then I realized that probably what would have been a better heading for the webinar, or the catchline would be managing diabetes and pregnancy made easy. Because increasingly in a country like India, we are seeing a huge burden of type 2 diabetes, and it's coming earlier and earlier. And as Abhijit will also agree, and most of the people on the webinar, how we are seeing much younger people with diabetes. So now we get a lot of women in their 30s who already have type 2 diabetes, and then they want to plan pregnancy or whatever, and that's the time they come to us, or often when they're already pregnant. And I think most endocrinologists and people managing diabetes, every single day or maybe once every alternate day in the clinic, you'll find a person with very high blood sugars who knew they had type 2 diabetes, but for whatever reason was not able to take care of their diabetes, and they have HbA1cs which is sky high, and they're pregnant, and then they look to us for guidance as to what to do. I think that a lot of this is because once a patient sees you for type 2 diabetes, you and they step out of the office. So they come to your clinic, they see you, you tell them whatever needs to be done, and then they step out, and then real life happens. There's a wedding in the family, there are deaths in the family, it's school homework, PTA meetings, especially in women who bear a 70% probably of the responsibility of the house as well. So what happens with women who come to the doctor and get a prescription of diet, exercise and medication is when they leave the clinic, getting them to continue to follow your prescription is very difficult. So in between clinic appointments, which are say 3 months apart, you don't have any contact with the patient. And I think that is one of the reasons why the patients are not able to keep up their motivations. A lot of times what happens is they have minor problems with their medications, which they would like to address, want the doctor to address, but they have no way of contacting the doctor. And doctors, being as busy as they are not able to help them. Often because of this lack of communication, the patient falls off the grid, gets frustrated and stops the medication or doesn't take them as advised. And then the HbA1c is really high and they get pregnant. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is that especially in women with diabetes, they need support, but the support cannot be limited only to the time that they visit you in the clinic or they consult you on a single video consultation. We need to continue to communicate with our patients to ensure that they're able to follow what we've advised them. And this is better not only for the patient, but also for the doctor, because you will get women with much better HbA1cs planning pregnancy, and it makes your life easier. So that is why we are here today to discuss about, how we manage diabetes in pregnancy. So I'm not going to give any talk on how exactly we manage, but this is what usually the flow of treatment is, that usually you get referred a patient who's undergone an OGTT in a gynecologic clinic, and then they refer to you because the OGTT values are deranged. Then, of course, what most of us do is get a diet assessment done. We do lifestyle modifications. We ask them to exercise. Then we put them on treatment. And this could be either metformin and insulin. And Abhijit and I will be taking some of the questions about metformin and insulin at the end of the webinar. And of course, we ask the patients to do SMBG, and we do insulin dose adjustment for the 9 months of pregnancy to give a good glycemic control to the patient. We know the targets are roughly a fasting blood sugar less than 90 or 95 mg per dl and a post-meal peak of less than 120. So this is how normally diabetes is managed. So what are the problems? There's a huge amount of work which goes into managing a woman who has diabetes in pregnancy. I think what the most we contend with is the diet queries. Can I eat this? Can I eat that? At least now what happens with me, and this is more of my personal journey as well, that I'm hit with a barrage of WhatsApp messages for appointments. And because I have a very good connect with the gynecologist in Navi Mumbai, so I've written it somewhere. I think that I've managed about 150 to 200 gestational diabetes patients during the COVID, and all of it has been remote. I haven't seen a single one of them in person. So, but to just contend with all those WhatsApp messages and requests and SMBGs is very difficult. We also need to spend time convincing the patient for insulin. Though pregnancy is much easier to convince, and Corona has made our job easier because patients are more, I think, okay with taking insulin because they want their sugars controlled. And of course, explaining technique, explaining titration. And often, which is what I have done for most of my career, is see SMBGs of patients for 9 months with absolutely no fees. So I'll just tell the patient, send the SMBG every week, and if there's a problem, we'll call you back. And that's what I've been doing so long. But as your practice increases, it becomes increasingly difficult to give that much of time. So the biggest challenge is making the changes in the patient's lifestyle, giving the medications, and getting people to keep following them for the rest of the pregnancy. So often in pregnancy, what would happen is I would explain everything to the patient. And then there's a familiar phrase, which at least people in Maharashtra are familiar with, ki humko gaon jana hai. So because India, Mumbai is cauldron of all regional, people from all over India come to Mumbai. Every time, the minute it's maybe April or May, there's a mass exodus, the people are lost to follow up, and suddenly the woman will come back in the 8th month of pregnancy with this huge high blood sugar control. And I would often think, that I wish I could have supported her during those months when she couldn't be here. If there's anything, women in Maharashtra go off to Gaon. So it's Ganpati, it's Diwali, it's Dasara, they want to go to the Gaon. So it's no problem if they go, but often the expertise which you want for pregnancy and diabetes is not available in smaller cities. And that's the time when you don't want to lose your connect with the patient. So in my talk, I'm going to highlight what are the challenges in managing diabetes in pregnancy. The tech I'm very bad at, and Abhijit will do all the talking about the tech and how exactly it works. But how has it made my life easier? Where are the points where we could have an intersection? That's what we're going to talk about. So major challenges are nutrition, SMBG, exercise, medications. Now, making nutritional modifications to a patient's diet is very easy. And a lot of time, the physician or the gynecologist does it in the clinic themselves and says, okay, you know what, don't eat sweets, don't eat fried foods, and don't eat bakery products, and you should be good, right? Now, what happens with just these three instructions is your job is done, and patient says, okay, doctor, I'll do everything. But getting the patients to actually stick to these modifications is extremely difficult, especially in a country like India, where social pressures during pregnancy for the woman to eat a lot is very, very high. And even as an endocrinologist, I was given this inane amount of information on what I should and should not be eating. Also, to continue the changes post-delivery is a very big challenge for patients with type 2 diabetes and patients who have gestational diabetes and then are at risk of future type 2 diabetes. So maintaining those modifications is actually the bigger challenge. Yeah, the one which troubles me the most is solving those queries about laddus and badam kha sakte hai, kharik kha sakte hai, what will happen to my baby, chicken kha sakte hai, pizza kha sakte hai, vomiting ho rahi hai. So this barrage of questions about food is something which I'm really troubled by, and I just don't have the time or the resources to contend with. So does a physician or an endocrinologist or a diabetologist who's managing diabetes in pregnancy really want to do this? The answer is unequivocally no. You want the nutritionist to lead the nutrition part. You just want to be told what are the major changes that are made and how it affects your treatment decision. So the way that I follow is that if any patient with gestational diabetes or type 2 diabetes comes to me, the first person who sees my patient is actually my nutritionist. And my nutritionist will take a detailed history about her entire diet recall. She'll look at what calories she's consuming, what are the quality of the calories, and she'll give me a summary of what is happening with the patient. Now, what happens is when I get that summary, I get an idea of how much modification is possible in this patient. So if there is an extensive possibility of modification in diet or in exercise or in the quality of the calories, then I can hold the metformin or the insulin, and I would probably focus on the diet first for the first few weeks, and failing diet, I would like the patient to then go on to medication. Of course, this doesn't mean that if a woman comes to you at 36 weeks of pregnancy or 34 weeks of pregnancy, you're going to waste time with diet. No. So it also depends on what gestational age the patient comes to you. So early in pregnancy, there's a lot of scope for diet and lifestyle modification, and this is how I start any patient with treatment. And of course, I want my dietitian, if she's made any major changes over the course of the 9 months, then I want her to inform me. Getting patients to exercise, very difficult. More importantly, patient says, yes, doctor, I'm exercising every day. But to measure that compliance is very challenging. So if you could have some way of measuring the steps that they take a day, that would give us a rough idea of how much exercise this patient is doing. So we would like to know about it. Also, sometimes if there are episodes of hypoglycemia, you'd like to correlate it with the exercise. That is the patient experiencing hypoglycemia during the exercise phase. The other challenges are getting patients to do SMBGs. Now, what happens is when you start the treatment, patients do the SMBG and are very compliant. Of course, there are this one group of patients who are amazingly compliant and will do everything right for the rest of the pregnancy. But a lot of times, with continuing normal values or what they assume to be normal values, patients stop having that motivation to continue to do their SMBG. So kind of it slowly, the frequency will drop off. Getting them to keep doing it and then sharing the data in a timely fashion. So this has happened to me where I've told the patient that do the SMBG and share it with me, and she assumes it's normal and then she will not send it, and then she sends it to me a month later where all the values are deranged, and I was like, what are you doing for a month? You needed to come back earlier. So if you have so again, what happens is in most of the clinics, in maybe about 1 year ago, not 1 year ago, yeah, so this is March 20 was the lockdown, so maybe from Feb or March, patients were expected to come into the clinic to show that SMBG chart, and obviously because of X and Y reasons, they're not able to come into the clinic, and therefore they don't show the values. A lot of times, a lot of the senior endocrinologists are not open to WhatsApp messaging, and of course that is their choice, but that's why the patient then will not come back at the frequency that you desire, and there's going to be a lot of uncontrolled blood sugars during the pregnancy. Integrating insulin doses with SMBG is pretty easy, but integrating the food and the SMBG, at least on a doctor level, is very difficult. Retaining all that data in one place, difficult, and having the context of the patient at the time of decision making, difficult. So a lot of my patients, when they used to send me on WhatsApp, I had to struggle to recollect which patient is this, what week of gestation is this, did she have a GDM in the past, did she have a large gestational baby, does she have a strong history of type 2 diabetes? I would not remember. So having a note or a context when you're looking at the SMBG reports is very important. And of course, sharing information about the correct insulin technique, storage of insulin, teaching them insulin titration is very difficult if you don't have an in-house diabetes educator. So the question I want to ask is, what if you could get all of this in one place at your fingertips? So what would then happen is that your life would be so much easier. So the 7Sugar app is something which is co-designed. So I specifically wrote diabetes specialist, because diabetes is not only the domain of endocrinologists, it's also the domain of physicians, of diabetologists. But the reason what is unique about the app is it's designed by somebody who manages diabetes on a day-to-day basis, and therefore has, the best information. A lot of times health technology companies make an app and then they try to force it on us and make us customize our practice to them. Well, that's not possible, because all of us have our own way of practicing, and specialists who manage diabetes usually all are very, very picky about what they need. So over the next few minutes, I'm just quickly going to take you through the case of my patient. I'm just going to tell you her journey and not go into the technology details. So, but this is a real story. So, and the patient is still in contact with me. And first came to me in February 2020. So I'm doing some research in diabetes and communication in diabetes, and just coincidentally Swati had come in that week to the clinic, and she was 39 years old. She'd been married a long time. She'd had diabetes for a very long time, and she had basically given up all hope of ever having a baby. And as most women will agree, this is something which is really important to them as part of their life. She was dejected, she was frustrated, she was demotivated. A lot of it stemmed from the communication which she had had with doctors in the past, who'd always been telling her that you will get diabetes just like your mother. You'll also get kidney failure. And she was so scared that it dissuaded her from doing any kind of intervention. And let me just underline that she was a diabetes educator herself, who was talking to other patients with diabetes, but doing nothing for herself. And her mother had CKD, who died because of these complications. Her HbA1c was 10% when she came to me. So what we did during that time was I put her on the app, because I knew that she would need a lot of hand holding. And there are those some patients, who are so dejected and demotivated. As a doctor, your heart goes out to them, and they need that extra push. So I put her on the app. We took a detailed history, family history, anthropometry. We did a good diet assessment, and though she was a diabetes education, her diet was not great. She was not walking, so we started her on a 40-minute walk daily. And of course, we encouraged her to start doing her SMBG and sharing it with us, so we could guide her better. So this is the kind of history we have, where you have your patient's anthropometry, you know what the weight is, you know what the waist circumference is. You can also track the weight gain, as the patient progresses. What type of diabetes, sorry for the typo on the diabetes spelling. She's had diabetes for 22 years. She has a very strong family history of diabetes. So I knew right away that this patient is going to require intensive insulin, and she's not going to do well with only metformin or anything like that. We knew what kind of diet she liked. She was a vegetarian, what were her meal times, and what were her preferences. So this is all data that we had, and which is very important in making treatment decisions. This is also very interesting, because when she came to me in the clinic, so this is her prescription paper, which she's actually uploaded onto the app. And she never told me about taking any alternative medicine. But when you're uploading in the app and the doctor is not sitting in front of you, you're more likely to tell the truth. See, she also has written down of what kind of alternate medicine she was taking for diabetes and kidney stone prevention, and some juices and everything. So we had to get her off all of that. And this is the visit where she was already taking actually basal insulin 22 units, and we had to put her on the bolus insulin as well. She wasn't doing much daily activity. What I also wanted to emphasize is that whenever you see a patient, and every time you see the patient, the history and the context of the patient is very important in deciding what you want to do for the patient. And therefore, having that prescription at the click of a finger is very, very important. So what we did was, we initiated bolus insulin. I put her on only, she was already on metformin, which I continued. We continued the glargine, but we revised how to titrate the glargine. I know that glargine is not approved in pregnancy, but the Endocrine Society guidelines do say that in patients who are already on glargine and you're afraid that the glycemic control will deteriorate, you can continue glargine. The other reason why I made the choice to continue glargine is because she's already 39 years old. She doesn't have much time for her fertility. So I didn't want to waste time in switching to an NPH, then struggling with glucose control, and then coming back to glargine. And that's why I continued it. I also initiated bolus insulin. We gave her all the information which she needed to initiate and titrate insulin, how to store the insulin, though she already knew everything. And that's how we went forward. Now, the progress that we had is it was very motivated. Once she was told, by us that there's no way that we won't be able to control her blood sugars, we gave her the confidence that, we'll be able to manage this. So she started sending photos of her food intake every day. We captured her steps, what exercise she was doing. We did a comprehensive nutritional analysis. How much is the carb, protein, fat, fiber? How can we make changes in the diet? We started doing an SMBG. We also had then now, as a result of the app, we had a time in range and what are the variations across the day. And the beauty of the app is just like WhatsApp, you have chat support all the time. So anytime the patient has a query, they don't need to call you and disturb you, which is extremely intrusive for a doctor. So what I would do is once a day, I'd just go open the app and just check the chats and see whoever has texted me and then just give an answer to all of them at one time. So we were also available for chat support if she wanted to, tell me anything. And that's when she gave me the good news a couple of months later, so just recently, that she's actually, her HbA1c came down to 7%. And she's pregnant now, and she'll be going for her first, dating scan and everything very, very soon. So this was what her blood sugars were like. And if you can see the tracking, I'm sorry, Abhijit, I put a poor picture, and please, I hope you're going to do a better job.
Yeah.
So what we found initially when she came is that the fasting pre-meals were, about 115, 130. The post-meals were pretty high, especially for the preconception. So this is, I'm talking before she got pregnant. And the readings were in target only about 83% of the time. And as time processed, she started to get better. Her pre-meals started to come down. Her post-meals have come down. And finally, prior to getting pregnant, I think it was around June or July when HbA1c came down to 7%. And then I declared okay, great, now you can go ahead and plan for a pregnancy. So now, of course, we'll be intensively managing also throughout the pregnancy, but because of the app, we have all the previous information, and then it's just easy to now kind of seg into the gestational management. So she's now pregnant after 12 years of marriage. She continues to send us her SMBG exercise and nutrition. We continue to capture, and that's a good story that we have. And also, let me remind you that after February 2020, I have never seen again in person, and all of this has been done through the app over the past 6 to 9 months. And my nutritionist and I are a team together, and whatever we do, so she can communicate independently with my nutritionist, so I don't get all the questions about can I eat bhel puri and pani puri, because I don't want to answer those questions. So Shruti gets those questions, and I get questions about the insulin and what to do about the titration, and doctor, just have a look at my SMBG and everything else. So what are the answers to the questions I've been asking? So when you make nutritional modifications, patients can upload the pictures of their meals and get a complete analysis of their meals. They get reminders to upload their meals if they haven't. They will get pointers for meal modification as a result of it. So it's very nice that the patient gets a reminder that, look, you haven't uploaded the meals, you haven't done this, and you need to do it. So that makes the job of the doctor so much easier because it keeps the patient engaged. And of course, we can now extend your treatment also in the post-delivery period on the app. The post-delivery period is the time which is the most difficult to engage the patient and keep her on track, is because the new baby is there. They're struggling with the baby's sleep time. And at this time, if they have a seamless, communication with you without intruding on your practice as well, then it can be really beneficial. So one of my patients is recently delivered, and we've just been managing her on the app itself and guiding her what to do with her postpartum care as well. And we'll be seeing her in person 6 to 8 weeks after her delivery. Patients also get reminders for exercise. If they've been given an exercise plan and they don't follow it, they get that. They can track their steps. They get reminders to upload their SMBG, and you're available on the chat box to remind them for anything. You want to give them any message, you want to tell them to change the doses, you want to tell them that this food needs to be changed. All of it can be done seamlessly through the chat box. All the reports are available with a clear charting telling us that what time of day is the problem. And we have a note section where you can just put the decision, the context of the patient every time that you're seeing them. Sorry, Abhijit, these are my last two slides. So this is actually this is a chart for me, that this is what I was doing pre the app, that I was managing everything on WhatsApp. And I have been in practice for a very long time, and I have a huge GDM practice, and I was managing everybody on WhatsApp. But after a time, I couldn't recall what was the face of the patient and what patient was it and what context it was. So what is the difference? So on WhatsApp, my dietitian can give a diet chart and she can send it to the patient. However, tracking the meals and reminders for sending the meals and the photos of the meals will not be there on WhatsApp, because you will not remember. You can get SMPG data on WhatsApp, yes you can, but getting it date-wise, time-wise, with charting, with time and range, looking at the glycemic variability, looking at the impact of exercise on the SMPG, you cannot do on WhatsApp. You can titrate the insulin doses on WhatsApp, yes you can, but you need the context of the patient, which is always available for you when you're on the app, because the bio of the patient is available. Patient can send messages about any doubts. The problem with that is because then your WhatsApp is always like filled and crammed with messages. With the chat box, it's at your discretion that when you have time, you can attend that message. You cannot send prescriptions by WhatsApp. While in this, you have an integrated prescription also. So they'll get an electronic prescription. So if they need to buy needles, they need to buy insulin, you can also send them a prescription in the app. The medical legal implications of WhatsApp, we don't take any consent. However, when a patient onboards onto the app, we do take informed consent, and the fact that the patient themselves onboards, that is implied consent. And WhatsApp is there on the phone, and you can also do the app on the phone. You can also use it on a laptop or a desktop, whatever you want. And I needed staff to kind of coordinate everything for me. So if you have a business WhatsApp account, then you need somebody to look at all the messages and tell you everything. While here, and then you need to go to the EMR to see what the context was. While here, all the prescriptions, all the reports, everything is available, and it's easy for you to manage the patient. And with the EMR, at least as of now, and I'm technologically challenged, so maybe Abhijit will kind of shed some light on that. But as of now, I'm not aware of any EMR where it can automatically update SMVG and things like that. So thank you very much. And I'll give the mic over to Abhijit, and then we'll take the questions at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tejal. It was simply nice to go through the whole journey of your patient, and this is just not one. You've done it for like 300 people in the past few months. Yeah, so it was
tiring. Let me tell you.
So no, I hats off to you, seriously, because the amount of physical hours it takes to do this is simply mind blowing.
Seriously.
So I'm going to just start off with my presentation. I hope my slides are visible. There's no slides actually. So yeah, I hope you're seeing this. So this is my daughter's art on the background. So are you seeing this?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So let me just walk you through one of the biggest. So this photo is actually from August of 2 years back. And as Dr. Tejal has already mentioned, her inbox being full. So this is just a reminder photo that I have of one of my patients, and basically every part of the day you get these messages and explaining like, okay, this is my sugar at this time, this is my sugar, this is my MRN number, so this is my medical record number, I'm somewhere else, I'm getting these messages sitting at home. So my most popular message to all my patients is, what is your last prescription? What is your, so what did you eat? So that is my most popular message. So my reply to all these messages, what is your last prescription? Because I have no idea who you are. I just have a number and a name, because the names are so common most of the time. So this is just a reminder for me. So let's just get into, so now so what you're seeing here is what the patient will be experiencing. And so I'm just going to walk you through a typical journey of a GDM patient who's on multiple insulin. She's on a basal bolus insulin regime. So the challenges again is plenty, because again the questions keep coming in. So when so the initial part of the screens, what you're seeing here, explains to the patient. We get a basic idea of what the calories that they've consumed per day. You can see it in the top part of the box. Then the number of steps that they have done, exercise that they have done is summarized over here, and what reports that they have is summarized over here. So from the patient side, they are also getting to see what to do, the tasks that they have to do per day. So in the morning, I have to take this much of insulin. In the morning, I've been assigned so many calories to eat. And then what to eat also has been clearly demarcated in the charts given here in the bottom of the screen. So they have a fair idea what their day should be like. And if they have completed these tasks, they can just click on these buttons and enter the task. If they want to make alterations to what they've done in the day, if they've taken a lesser insulin dose, they can make a note which again comes back to the doctor. So now I'm going to enter, and so the challenges that we face while managing a GDM case, because most of the time we are blinded to half the things that are happening, whether it is their sugar levels or whether it's their eating patterns. So now when I'm saying somebody who is obese in this particular, if you take this particular case that I'm trying to highlight here, if the patient is obese and they're over consuming certain calories, if they're at a risk of gaining weight or if they have already gained weight, I have no way of tracking that. Then the next point is about the physical activity. The recommendations are very clear. Do around probably 30 minutes of exercise in a day. And then when they're doing this exercise, what is happening to their in the end, what is happening to the glycemic profile is something again that is which we are completely blinded. So let me just again walk you through how I would enter a value. So here, if I'm entering my, if I'm doing a sugar test, I would just go to the SMBG page here and enter the values, whether it's a pre-meal, post-meal, click that. Choose after doing my test. In the future, we'll be integrating devices which will directly input the values into the system. So all I've done is entered it and submit, clicked on submit. And the doctor gets to see these readings at immediately. The next important thing is the meal photograph. So all they have to do is go click the plus and click the plus button again and choose the take a photograph of the meal. Now I'm going to enter an abnormal vital. So why this is important? If they're at high risk of preeclampsia, who's tracking your patient? Nobody knows. So now this patient, I'm going to enter a value which is more than normal, and you will see how the doctor will receive this information so that they can action upon. All I have to do is click submit. You can track vitals of weight, heart rate, SpO2. If they have COVID also, you can track your diabetic patients. So I've sent these things. Now I want to send a message to my doctor. I just say, you have your whole care team, which is listed in this list in the chat page. You can have multiple doctors. You can have your gynecologist, your diabetic educator, your physiotherapist, everyone. If you have a big team that is managing your patient, you can have all of them here, and the patient can chat with anyone who is in charge. So I'm going to send the doctor a message. Please review. And we're sending it. So now when we get a message like this, my sugars are high, I'm not feeling well, you get random messages. So now let's look at it from a doctor standpoint, how this information is flowing on their side. So I'm going to this is the doctor application, and here as I mentioned, as I inputted the value of my blood pressure, which is higher than normal, we get alerts which are seen here. If they go above a calorie budget, or they're going beyond, the sugar levels are beyond a certain value, or the blood pressure is beyond a certain value, each of these patients are categorized in these separate groups. So they come into these separate categories. So as you can see here, the same 7:33 p.m. Whatever the value that I've inputted, the BP being more. So I get to click on the patient's information. I get to see what the patient's history by clicking the bio, and I get to know what is happening in this patient. By clicking the patient's profile, I can see the patient's information. So the same thing, what the message that has come to the patient from the chat, please review. So now I need more information about this patient. All I'd have to do is click the patient's profile. I get to see the summary of his prescription. And if I need to look at the glucose values, what has been inputted, I can see the fitness values over here. I know where this person has been physically active, whether they've been following the given plan. The SMBG value also is tabulated like this on the application. And so once I see this, I know exactly what is going on. So the all I need to do is go back, change the prescription, make some changes to edit the prescription, and make changes here and adjust the dose and communicate back all is well. So it's it took me probably 3 minutes, and this is what your patient would have done. The patient would have had to come sit in a waiting area just to discuss their SMBG chart, and within this 2 minutes we have finished a complete consultation. I get alerts when patients are out of target. Most of the patients are put into packages, and the doctors on the platform have their specific recommendation when they want to be alerted, what type of consultation they would want, when they want to see the patient. It could be on a weekly basis, it could be on a monthly basis, whether they should meet their dietitian or diabetic educator directly. So all that workflows we can customize in the application like this. So now let's move on from the data what we are collecting, not just from the app point of view. Let's now discuss another case. This lady is 36 years old, and G2A1. So this pregnancy is definitely a very precious a pregnancy for her. And so we started off. We basically started off once her postprandial glucose was around 155. So that is where the gynecologist gave me sent me the referral to manage and see what was going on. She was extremely apprehensive of what to do. So basically, we used a CGM. Right now, the Libre Pro is not approved for GDM, but there is no restriction from us from using it. The reason it is not approved in GDM cases because of the accuracy factor. And but we are using it more to see patterns and how quickly we need to action upon when we are dealing with our cases. Because when we ask them, when it's like kind of overwhelming, she's already 30 weeks, and you tell this person do a 6-point point monitoring, and then the talk of insulin, it becomes extremely overpowering. The amount of information, it kind of becomes a scary kind of a scenario for most of them. So if the sugars are relatively, if it's like a newly diagnosed case, we start off with the GDM to get with the CGM to get patterns. So that is what we are using it. We don't go by the exact value of the CGM device, but to see the patterns. Here very clearly, her breakfast, the breakfast is seeing a moderate amount of spike, relatively stable at lunch, and her sugar levels are another small spike at dinner. The green bars that you see here in the bottom is the calories that are coming from the carbs, and you exactly know she has a heavy breakfast and a heavy dinner. So that's her lunch is kind of moderate. If the physical activity was recorded, you would see how active she would have been during the whole day in this bar over here. And we have glucose statistics for the whole day, and clearly her levels at breakfast is at higher, and her average sugars at dinner is also on a higher level. So using these points of information, we can now focus and see where the problems are starting to happen. Now the doubt is obviously, do I need to immediately start them on insulin? Will metformin work? All these come into our overall treating plan. So when we see the eating pattern, exactly we know if this person is overloading on carbs. There is rice and there is a ragi ball. In south of India, people eat raw dough of either ragi or wheat. So, and again, this is a very high GI food. There is a misconception by most of them that the ragi is great for their blood sugars. And so they start to eat more of this. So that is where they don't understand. When you see the photographs like here, and we are counseling the patient directly, look, this is your portion size. You need to cut this off. The fiber content of what your meal is quite low. You need to hit around 10 grams of fiber. All this concise data is available to us now by just looking at their meal patterns. So this is a typical snack for this person. Again, maida is again a high GI food, along with a glass of milk, which is high fat milk. So that is pretty okay. But the 3 slices of bread as a mid-morning snack definitely is not something that we would be recommending. What is the sugar levels after such a snack? If it is still normal, then that means she's doing great. Maybe just, yeah, with some small modifications of diet. Now I have the confidence because I'm seeing the eating patterns. I'm very confident that this person, I can make these changes with the diet itself, because I have these numbers to correlate. After they finish the CGM for 14 days, they are monitored using SMBG for the next till this person till she delivered. She was followed up again with her readings. Again, we know exact the problem areas. We are visualizing the glucose data here, and we are able to action upon. Again, we have seen she takes high carb meals, and then her averages also are quite high post breakfast. And dinner, she's not, occasionally she is going above target. And the same data is distributed from a week wise to see the first week if she is doing well. So each of this information, once you counsel the patient using all this knowledge, it becomes a very wholesome aspect of your diabetes management. And it is the data is in one place, and you're able to correlate everything very clearly. And because of this structured form of data, you can have you can probably do a lot more of your own research, because we are structuring data in a very precise manner. So I hope I've given you a good overview of how the whole platform works, and I hope you have a good idea now with these cases how we are using it, using technology to deliver better care. And the platform also has an integrated video conferencing, so you can get into a teleconferencing call at any time. So and you can schedule that based on what kind of the way you practice your day-to-day practice.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Abhijit, and thank you, Dr. Tejal. It was an amazing webinar. I think based on the comments I'm seeing on the chat, everybody loved it. So thank you both. I think we'll now shift to the Q&A section. And so just give me a minute. Let me pull up the questions. We had quite a few of them.
You know what, Adi? We will do the question answer, because we'll just decide, I mean, and maybe summarize instead of like addressing each and every question.
Sure. Yeah, let me say, what some of I've grouped them into 4 or 5 categories.
Yes, you have.
Yeah. So the question is on one, there's a lot of questions on role of metformin in GDM. Is it safe? Then there's a question of, SMBG versus CGM in GDM, which one is preferred and which one is convenient.
Okay, so wait, Adi, we'll just quickly take it one at a time.
Sure.
I think we start with Abhijit talking about CGMS versus SMBG, because I do not have that much experience with CGMS in pregnancy, but I think Abhijit has a lot of experience of both. So maybe he could tell us which is better and why.
Yeah. Yes. So that's an excellent question by Dr. Neeraj. So basically, how we are using CGM is to kind of calm the people's nerves. And once basically CGM right now, the Libre Pro is not approved for GDM cases, but the Libre, which is coming to India in another 2 months, is approved for GDM use. The MARD value of the Libre Pro is quite less. So that is why we are not recommending it.
We don't know what is NARD value and stuff like that. So simple English, please.
So basically, when the accuracy of the sensor is less, even though most of the studies have shown that the sensor is as accurate as our glucometer, but we have seen in reality it is less. So when it comes to these high risk category cases like GDM, we want to be very, very certain of what the glucose levels are. So we use CGM to see what kind of patterns we are getting, where the problem area is happening. And it is an excellent tool to see patterns with regard to what kind of food that they are consuming. So when we ask our patients for the first time, when they are diagnosing to be diabetic for the first time, and we're telling them to check the sugars 6 times a day, the whole routine of it kind of becomes difficult. That is where again we take the help of GDM to see if there is actually a lot of variations, and so the learning is quite quick. So once we put the sensor, we call them back in 3 days, and we see the day curve to see what the patterns are. So it's like a hybrid model that we are using. And after 14 days, they are obviously put on to SMBG program. The monitoring, you can also focus the monitoring to the problem areas. So technically, when we see most of our cases, once they go through the CGM program, we know their eating patterns, we know which part of the day they're consuming a high carb meal, we know where they're exercising. So using this knowledge, we are asking them to check their SMBG values at this high risk areas. And so the frequency of testing also becomes very focused. It becomes, so they are convinced, okay, look, there is a problem here. I need to check my sugars here. So it is not like randomly we give them a blanket advice, do your sugars 6 times a day, do a fasting, and do the post meal 3 times a day. So it doesn't become it doesn't make sense to most of them, because they want to argue back with us, why am I checking? And when we are telling them you need insulin, they are not convinced. So, but when we show them the values that we are getting using the CGM, then they begin to understand. Look, you're exposing the child to this high glycemic exposure. This is where it is happening. It is happening mostly because of your diet. But see, you're eating correctly, your carb load is correct, but still your glucose exposure is high. So these kind of conversations you can have with such kind of evidence. And that is where we're using a hybrid model of CGM as well as SMBG, and we're able to counsel the patient much better.
Can I just summarize that, Abhijit? So the point I liked very much is you do one CGM in the pregnancy. You also identify the area which requires the most amount of attention, and then you can focus the SMBG on that area rather than doing the usual 4 to 6 values which we make them do all the time.
Correct.
So I think convenience-wise, the CGMS is great for at least you to focus the attention, and then you could reduce the number of pricks that they need to take. Correct. Definitely. And then of course the integration of food and the the CGMS would be fantastic. About metformin, we all use metformin, I think, and in resource constraints settings, what Professor Ong has also asked. So yes, ma'am, we do use metformin. We realize that ideally we should be using insulin for everyone, but in a country like ours, with a lot of resource limited settings, we do use a lot of metformin. Abhijit, do you use metformin? Are you okay with it?
Yes, very much. Actually, most of the time, patient has already been started on metformin. Most of the cases, if there are PCO, they're already on metformin. They're going into their pregnancy with metformin. So it's like a continuation of the whole process. And we are starting insulin once we start seeing the raise in postprandial sugars, and then once the fasting also is not getting, then we add the basal also. So that's how we are looking at it as of now. So definitely metformin is being used quite a lot.
Okay, so one of the other questions is, what is the possibility of child getting diabetes? So if it's gestational diabetes, it is unlikely that the child will have any diabetes, at least not at birth. So at least in the pregnancy and postpartum period, the mother is our focus, and there is little or no risk of the child getting type 2 diabetes, at least at the time of delivery. There's one more question. Do you want to comment upon the diagnostic criteria, Abhijit? Whether we should use 1 hour or 2 hour?
So again, it becomes on the convenience. So I use more of 1 hour. I guess it is a matter of where you catch the peak. I rather like to catch the peak rather than because at 2 hours there is a change that has happened already. It could be because of an influence of physical activity. So I like to catch the peak. So in my preference, I go for the 1 hour. So the target to hit at 1 hour is less than 140. At 2 hours, it is less than 120. So that's what we have been following according to the guidelines.
So Abhijit, what I do is that most of the time it's about 1.5 to 2 hours, because anyway patients would never do it exactly at the same time. But what I find is a lot of times the gynecologist gets back to us that the 2-hour values are all normal, but the abdominal circumference is increasing or the baby's weight is increasing. And that is the time, a lot of times we then go back to the 1-hour value and we kind of see whether we're also hitting the 1-hour target as well as the 2-hour target. So that has been my experience quite a lot of times. So, Abhijit, if in 2 to 3 sentences, could you summarize it? How will the 7 Sugar app help doctors managing diabetes in pregnancy?
Basic challenge for any one of us now with this new world scenario of COVID is to have access to your patients. It is to analyze and to know what is going wrong with your patients. And when it comes to diabetes management, whether it is pregnancy or regular type 1, type 2, it is an integration of lifestyle as well as diet. All of it put together with the right kind of medication. So I cannot just say I'm doing the medication is correct, but ignore everything else. And the patient will be doing everything wrong. With 7 Sugar, it puts all these 3 aspects, the pillars of diabetes, what we are doing for home management of diabetes, that is the diet, physical activity, fitness, as well as medication. All of it is put into one platform where we are able to manage our cases in a wholesome manner, like getting the whole picture. That's my experience. What's your experience, Dr.
So just today, I can tell you the experience for today. So an oncologist from Tata Memorial Hospital consulted me today for diabetes and pregnancy. She was 30 weeks pregnant and she's been taking metformin 2000 milligrams, Novomix as well as Novorapid 3 times a day. So 2 times Novomix, 1 Novorapid. All the blood sugars are 180. Now, when I went into the details, it was only diet, diet, and diet. So whoever was managing her kept on increasing the insulin and the metformin and telling her carb kam khao, carb kam khao. So what she was doing is eating less rice and eating biscuits, bread, rusk, toast. She was eating all of that. So what I end up seeing a lot of time, I get physician referrals for diabetes and pregnancy where they've already initiated insulin and then they're struggling with control. And 90% of the time, I just do the diet intervention. The job is done. I don't need to increase the insulin. I don't need to increase the metformin dose. And 90% of the time, just managing the nutrition and exercise, it's done.
So that's where the power of this platform comes through, because we are able to see what is happening. And that is, I never thought, looking at photographs makes all the difference. But when they say, no, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and you get the whole story. So I'll give you an example. Morning, there'll be like 5 biscuits, 5 to 6 biscuits.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
It's hidden there. And then after the biscuit, the postprandial breakfast is like 200, 300. We're trying to figure out, what do you do in the morning? I don't eat anything. I don't do anything. And when we specifically, when that's where the CGM kind of like reveals these peaks. And you can see a distinct peak in the morning jump and then another huge jump after breakfast. So then I'm like, your breakfast doesn't seem to the quantity of what you're taking, carbs that you're taking at breakfast doesn't match. So that is where, when we use these integrated systems using CGM, it reveals these hidden parts of what they're doing in a day, and then you can exactly pinpoint. And then they say, I thought I was eating biscuit. It's a sugar-free biscuit. So then, so things like that. So you learn a lot.
So the gentleman I saw today, he kept telling my nutritionist कि मैडम को बोलो दवाई चेंज करने को, मैडम को बोलो दवाई चेंज करने। वो दिन में 16 बिस्किट खा रहा था। मैंने बोला आप सिर्फ बिस्किट बंद करो, शुगर कंट्रोल हो जाएगी, मेरी फीस मत भरो, वो बिस्किट पे पैसा मत खर्च करो. So yes, this is almost like Sherlock Holmes and digging and digging and digging until you find what the problem is.
Yeah.
Okay, so Abhijit, the next question is about any newer medications to manage gestational diabetes. What about the safety of other oral hypoglycemics in the 2nd and 3rd trimester?
I don't use, apart from metformin, I don't use anything else.
Yeah,
there is no point in us experimenting. There is enough and plenty of evidence with our either regular insulin, or you have our analog insulins to give us to do the job that is required to manage diabetes in pregnancy. I think it is best to be safe with anything else. So there is no scope for us to experiment anything else, and we have enough evidence with metformin, and it does its job. And with the insulins also, I use a lot of Detimer. NPH, yes, I do use in cases where it is a financial constraint. But all in all, we are able to do justice with what we have already.
I completely agree. I just use metformin and insulin and nothing else. Abhijit, just very quickly, can we discuss about the postpartum? So do all your gestational diabetes patients continue to take metformin even after delivery? What do you do with the insulin immediately in the postpartum period? We're not talking about type 2 diabetes, we're talking about GDM.
So again, it depends on case to case what we are seeing, and immediately postpartum, what the next day morning fasting sugars are. If it is less than, if it is come to a pre-diabetic range, again we'll put them. We'll have to monitor the diet again, see the eating patterns, and then again follow up after about a month and a half with a GTP at that stage. And but again, I because of the use cases of so if it's been more than a year between a CGM, then again I put them on a CGM. What we are again learning with the CGMs is pre-diabetes. So again, and we start to pick out those small changes that they're doing with their eating habits, because we get quick spikes that we are seeing on the graphs after a meal. So again, those kind of high glycemic foods, if they start eating correctly or getting the right kind of balance between the carbohydrate and fiber and carbohydrate protein ratio, if they are able to achieve that, then we get a much better glycemic profile which does not irritate the body. So for postpartum, yes, the levels are the next day, and based on that we are deciding whether to continue medicines or at a reduced value. And but definitely diet has to be monitored postpartum, and then after about a month and a half we are doing the GTT.
One of the very useful things to do, which is completely not related to the app, is talk to the mother and the mother-in-law in the peripartum period. So what I do is I hit when the iron is hot. When I go to visit the patient in the clinic, in the hospital in the postpartum period, I don't talk to the patient. I just talk to the mother and the mother-in-law for the laddus. You know, they're so excited that their contribution to the peripartum care is going to be making of the laddus. So that's my contribution most of the time. And what happens is, you know, Abhijit, during pregnancy, somehow they listen to us. But once the minute the baby is delivered, the social pressure of eating right for lactation becomes so huge.
Right.
It's very difficult for the women to contend with that pressure.
So what we have learned, the amount of weight gain that is happening postpartum. So the
Yes.
majority of the women who get obese and they complain that their pregnancy, this is their time. This 6
Yes.
months is
Yes.
so critical.
Yes.
They're lactating. The metabolism is quite high. They're eating more. So you be wise, eat right. Use that this time frame to kind of optimize your body weight. Again, don't crave for foods which are calorie dense and end up gaining a lot of weight, because again it becomes the challenge to lose that is another thing, and they'll end up becoming type 2 diabetic around 50 to 60% of the time. We have seen that happen because they have not got back to the optimized
So
body.
it's the best time. It's also the most difficult time to get through, because I'll tell you why, Abhijit. So that's the point of having a woman's perspective. This is a time in a woman's life. She's never been a mother before. She's never taken care of a baby before. So getting, your head around sleeping schedules of the baby, getting the hang of lactation, and then this immense societal pressure for lactation. So the sad part is that the woman is not important. See, entire pregnancy, she's forced to gain weight, not because it's healthy for her, because it will give rise to a healthy baby. And even in the peripartum period, she's forced to eat because it will give good lactation, but not because they're bothered about the mother's health. So I try to communicate to the mothers and the mothers-in-law that if you truly care for your daughter, then this is the time when you're going to have to make her do the diet modifications. But of course, this is a struggle I think that all doctors have on a daily basis with their patients.
So, yes, it is a work in progress that we have to not just during pregnancy, postpartum also we have to make this effort. Otherwise, the battle
I
is
also
lost.
think that that habit of eating a lot, when it carries over post the lactational period, so post those 6 months
Correct.
postpartum, that's the time when the weight goes up. So initially there's a drop in the weight and then there's a surge.
And then also the postpartum depression and other aspects, and it is often so many times missed. Nobody knows that. I mean, they blame it on raging hormones, but I guess that is also a very important aspect. And so I think we have to be aware of all these things, and then
Help them with it.
yeah.
So a few more questions. What about controlling fluctuation in sugar levels, glycemic variability? Even if the patient is taking low glycemic foods, still the blood sugars are not controlled.
So bolus insulin, go up on your bolus, and if it's a type 1, then definitely try to optimize your carbohydrate insulin ratio. I see what patterns of one thing is consistency.
Yeah.
Now, when there is such a lot of variability in the glycemic profile, I tell them, take a food which you can continue to eat, and I know that okay, you're taking this much of food, and also try to follow a routine where your activity is also matched. So if you every day you're taking a different quantity of food and you're changing your diet very frequently, it becomes difficult in certain cases. So we tell them to follow a routine which is replicable, and quantity wise also when it comes to the carb load which is acceptable, and a routine which is something that they need to do on a daily basis. So then the predictability is there. Then remaining other things can be managed with the basal bolus insulin.
And I think again, this most of the times what happens, I feel, is that physicians are very overburdened. And even if you have a diabetes educator or nutritionist in the clinic, if you're seeing about say 60 patients a day, it's just totally impossible to get all the work in at that time. So what I look at the app is like outsourcing your work and getting somebody else at the back end to do most of the heavy lifting, and then you can be the brand face and communicate most of the instructions, but the heavy lifting is done at the back end.
Yeah. So when you know everything is happening, when we report it, like you've seen the reports, within those few seconds, I know exactly all what is happening in the eating pattern, because the photographs are laid with the sugar values. I know, okay, and also we can see the variability in their eating patterns, whether they're eating on time. Each day is different. So all those things are things that we need to look at. So it gives you that you're not blinded. You have a very fair understanding what is going on, and it is a very focused management that we can do.
Another question, Abhijit, is what about HbA1c during pregnancy? So do you really follow HbA1c? Is there any target you rely on?
I actually don't, because
thank you for saying that, because I was going to say the same thing. I don't do HbA1c.
Yeah, so if you want to follow, but still the A1C is a poor
indicator.
Yeah, it is a extremely poor indicator. Not only that, I'll get a number like 7. Now, what are you going to do with 7? Exactly. How are you going to? It's a day-to-day aspect in GDM. Managing GDM is a day-to-day aspect. So having a 3-month control is not by the time the baby is delivered. So it doesn't make any sense. So you have to look at it from a week wise as well as day wise, and take it from there. So that is how I look at it.
And couple of points, Abhijit. One is that there are not really any criteria which clearly define what is the HbA1c target during pregnancy. If at all you want to do it, you'd have to do it on a monthly basis to get the trend of the HbA1c. There's a lot of hemodilution and a lot of other things going on in pregnancy, severe anemia, all of which impact the HbA1c. But what I like the best that you said, when you look at a value of 7%, what do you do with it? There is nothing you can do with it. So until you know, is the fasting high? Is it the post breakfast? Is it the post dinner? Where exactly is the problem, which only an SMBG or a CGMS can give you that kind of insight? You can't really manage the patient. So even in type 2 diabetes, a lot of patients say, I get only HbA1c done. But what happens is you need always both the fasting post meals as well as the HbA1c, because HbA1c tells you about the long-term risk of complications. Fasting and post meals tell you what medication to use, what are the problem areas, where is the nutritional modification needed. So that actually guides you to the actual treatment of the patient. HbA1c can't help you with that.
Correct. Absolutely right.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. Please go ahead. Somebody was speaking.
I think somebody sneezed. So
sorry. Are there any other questions we missed? COVID-19 and GDM, Abhijit, any comments?
COVID-19, so the only challenge will be if they're using steroids. So most of the mild COVID cases they are using, but in pregnancy, again, I think people are going to be even more, careful what they're going to be using. I do not have any information with regard to the use of the antiviral, so I'm not at a position. I've not actually managed a GDM case as of now with COVID, but I've seen your regular.
Yeah, same here. So though I attend a maternal and child health clinic, but what happened, Abhijit, is the people who delivered in the pandemic were the ones who had just come for delivery, because those who were early in the pregnancy didn't venture out, so they didn't contract the infection at all. So luckily they just came at the time of delivery, so that's why it was not much of a hassle.
So these are still learnings for us. Somebody has mentioned 75 grams of anhydrous glucose.
Yeah, so it's just that you need to take, if you have Glucon-D powder, how do you measure 75 gram anhydrous?
So you break it up into 50-50. So it comes in a 100-gram pack. So the first 50, you break it again into another half. So that makes it 25 grams. So that is how you will get 75 grams. There are a couple of brand packets that come in 75 grams anhydrous glucose also. So any of these things can be used, but your Glucon-D, which comes in 100 grams, can be used by measuring it in this fashion. Artificial sweeteners. I am not a big fan of artificial sweeteners, especially in pregnancy. There are 4 varieties of artificial sweeteners, and in that maybe sucralose is something that can be used in but still these are things that we have not much
when
of
patients
knowledge.
beg me, I allow them sucralose, because ideally there is approval for use of non-nutritive sweeteners in pregnancy. So if somebody insists a lot, then I will allow. Otherwise, yes, most of the time we'll avoid. So that is Dr. Meenakshi. She's from Navi Mumbai. She's a wonderful nutritionist, managing a lot of children with childhood obesity and PCOS. She's the one who's asked you the question.
So the important point about artificial sweeteners, use it again for the beginning, till like if this is like postpartum, if you are talking about, again, these are areas where we are not going to be using. After the lactation period, the person is trying to lose weight but having difficulty to get rid of the sugar addiction, then you can use artificial sweeteners as like a bridge, so that they can start reducing their overall load of direct sugars. So that is how I would use, and then after they kind of are out of direct sugars, then also stop the artificial sweeteners altogether. So that is where we would be using that. Have we covered all the questions?
I think most of them. Adi, are we done? Do we have any more questions?
I think we covered most of the important questions that everybody had. If someone has any last question, please do ask. Otherwise, I think we had a fantastic session. Thank you, Dr. Tejal. Thank you, Dr. Abhijit. Thank you for all the participants for joining on a Saturday evening. I hope you found it useful and productive. Probably in the next.
Adi, some of them wanted some details, so can I pass on? Can you give me a number which I can pass on? Some people just wanted to know, so I could maybe pass on the number or something.
Yeah.
Or a link.
Yes, I will share the number.
7sugar.com. They can go to 7sugar.com.
Okay, yeah. So Adi, or just ping me any number or something they can contact where they want any information. I'll give it to them.
Yeah. So I think the number to call is they can call me 9686 1.
Yeah, I'll pass it on. So I know the people who are asking, all of them, they're my friends. So they want to know. I will pass on the number.
Sure, please. Yeah. So thanks again. Thank you so much, Dr. Tejal. Thank you, Dr. Abhijit. Fantastic session. I hope we do more of this, and truly help people move to the digital age and help their patients wherever they are. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye everyone. Good night.
Bye, Dr. Tejal. Thanks.
Bye Abhijit. Bye Adi. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you.